Welcome to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast, a fascinating and inspiring journey into the world of venture capital and startups. Each episode offers masterclasses and entrepreneurial stories from some of the top minds in the innovation economy. Get ready to unlock new ideas and gain valuable advice for how to thrive as an innovator and an investor. On this episode of Extraordinary Pursuits, Christy Johnson, the head of performance engineering for BIP Ventures, joins host Rochelle Kuramoto for a conversation about ICPs, or Ideal Client Profiles. In this discussion between these two subject matter experts, you will learn what an ICP is, why it's important to really limit how many ICPs you consider, and why it's important to only choose one, and how an ICP can function as a North Star for sales, marketing, and your entire scaling company. If you're a startup trying to think about your go-to-market motions, this is a conversation to listen to. Let's get started. What we're doing today is spending a few minutes talking about ideal client profiles, ICPs, as a foundation for marketing. We've talked about this in a variety of other podcasts, and we thought that we would take a few minutes to just chat today about how you ensure that you have built your ICP correctly, that if there is a need for ICPs and target audiences, that we are thinking about those appropriately so that we can engage resources properly to attract and convert and retain audiences who are interested and willing to buy what we have. And then also, the grand finale and the grand hope is to have them advocate for your company, for your brand. So Christy Johnson and I are going to have a conversation about what is an ICP and how we put them to use. So we'll start with the fundamentals. So Christy, this very basically, what is an ICP and why is it so absolutely foundational to building your marketing and sales strategy?
So thank you, Rochelle. I think this is a very timely topic. It comes up often, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the stage of company. I mean, obviously it's super important in the early stages, but even as companies get into sort of the growth, the traction, the scale stages, this is something that they probably need to look at and revisit at least annually when they're doing their strategic plan and revisiting that every year. So in its simplest form, ICP is the qualifications, the characteristics of your most valued customers. So, and I know that you had other things on the demographics and, what are the most important things to look at. And I typically say, we don't want to overcomplicate it, right? So in its very simplest form, you have the things that are the demographics and the, okay, we're going to start again because I'm not even, did you want me to not even say that one?
No, I think
the next one.
Whatever, however you want to proceed with that.
Okay, can we start again then?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Sorry for whoever's having to splice.
Yeah, no. Okay, well,
because I mixed those two things up and then I couldn't remember firmographics. So then I was like, I can't even remember that name.
So I'm going to start with just what is it and why is it important? And then I will ask you what are the key factors to consider. Okay,
got it.
So Christy, let's start with the basics. What is an ICP or an ideal customer profile and why is it important?
So its most basic level, it's just characteristics of the most valued customers that you have. So the reason that it's so important is because especially early on, you're selling to whoever will buy from you. And those are not necessarily they don't all equally fit. And the product doesn't solve the problems in equivalent fashion. And so what you'll find is you spend a lot of time targeting people that are not necessarily the best fit. You spend a lot of time trying to bring them on as customers, and eventually the likelihood of them churning is much higher because you don't have the best fit. So most companies have limited time, limited people, limited money, and so you you use your ICP where you have the best opportunity for success. And it doesn't mean that you can't sell to others, but in the very beginning, trying to get as clear of an understanding of who values your product or service the most is the surest way to sort of get traction across the organization.
So what I hear is this is not a set and forget type of a strategy.
Definitely not, because it's certainly early on, but like with any business, you're constantly learning. You get the market dynamics change, something changes with a competitor, something changes with a feature that you have in the product. And so that may like broaden or it might narrow who it is that the product works super great for. So I would say that at least annually, but when you are getting started, you have to sort of just, take the data as it comes, and you're fine tuning that across time. But it's definitely something that you're not going to want to set it and then forget it. You're going to, it's an integral part of your entire go-to-market strategy. So you're definitely going to want to revisit it.
So you're revisiting that on a regular cadence. And you mentioned taking in data. So if you have a young company and they are trying to figure out what is their ICP, who is this person, are you looking at doing expensive market research, or are you looking at the customers who are buying from you most frequently and not churning? Tell us a little bit about how that data is gathered.
Yep. So as you alluded to do market research is super expensive, and it's not necessarily you're not even potentially fully calibrated to take advantage of all of that. So you start with the data that you have. Again, you can't overcomplicate it because a lot of times they don't have that many customers. And so I always say, take out the people that you got because the founder had a relationship, or your friends and family, people that, gave you a subscription because they knew that you were a fledgling company and trying to get started. You could look at your customers and stratify them and try to understand those that are staying, so those that are renewing, those that are growing, and it also is important to understand who's churning. So then you take all those and segment those out and say, okay, what are the characteristics that all of these companies share, and hopefully you'll start to see some overlap so that you can start to then begin to form hypothesis on like who's going to be best. If you have lack of information, another place to go is your sales force and also your customer success employees. Everybody that's closest to the work has a really good feel. And so it could be something as simple as, I know that we started to target XYZ. Those conversations are going so much better. And it just really feels like, that they really get what we do, and that like they were shaking their head the entire time. It seems to really be resonating. And so those things are super helpful, right? When understanding, because they're like the tip of the spear, and they're the first people to really understand if a target change has taken place, or if we're targeting correctly. Then on the other side, on the success side, they're going to know, you say, who are your top 3 customers? And those are going to be people they have really strong relationships with, who really advocate for the product. They might give us referrals. They certainly have acted as a referral for us. And then try to okay, is there any overlap of what we're seeing? And just try to use the information that we have, but not try to certainly do that in a data bubble where, we're not asking the people who are closest to, the customers and the prospects on what they're thinking, because 9 times out of 10, collectively, we have the intel. We just need to figure out a way to pull that from everybody and then cross-reference and make sure that, what we're seeing with one individual is the same that's being experienced throughout.
That's really smart. And I think, when you're going to those frontline folks to ask these questions, having some standardization is probably going to be really helpful, because my thought is if this is something that's revisited, then they can be thinking about, okay, what are some of these key considerations that would make someone or a type of customer an ICP? So what are some of those key factors to consider when you're building out this profile?
Right. And actually, you brought up a really good point that as you try, the thing about the ICP is it sort of sets everything. It sets your targeting, it sets, the content strategy, it sets how our salespeople talk through it. So, it indicates where we want to take the product. I mean, all of these things are super synergistic if we think about them holistically for the organization. So it's a really good point to say hey, this is something that we're trying to do. And these are the characteristics of what we're looking for. And if you have really good conversations or you start to hear things shifting, this is going to be a conversation I'm going to be revisiting, but even have like communication channels throughout the organization. Maybe it's a Slack channel when you hear something, or it's a different use case or things like that, that have people cross-functionally sharing information because they all understand and are grounded in what we're trying to achieve and how important the ICP is. But to get back to your other question, there's, again, we don't want perfection to be the enemy of progress. So, if you go online and you read every single thing that you need to understand and how to develop an ICP, and there's all kinds of different dimensions to it. But I think like the demographics and, firmographics that are related to who you're trying to go after. So, the industry that they're in or the sector, the size, the job that somebody's has or their job title, those are kind of fundamental things that, you are not going to be able to target very effectively without it.
Mhm.
And then I would say the other thing that is corollary to that, that's equally important, is what are the problems that they're trying to solve, and how to, what's our specific value props and how do they solve it uniquely? Because that's, going to be as equally important once you find them. If they don't find value or you're not solving the problem and you don't know how to talk to that, that's also going to be challenging. So I'd say that those two pieces, trying to understand the problem and how it's solved, as well as the demographics of who it is, that where we found people who look like people who value what we do. You're just trying to find things that look similar. And then some things are just logical. Like if you have an enterprise product that, really works well with very large companies, you're probably not going to go after very small ones. But, there's common sense, and then there's the things that the data is telling us. And then, there's just experience that we have with the customers that we have, as well as the prospects.
That's awesome. That's really helpful. And it really simplifies it if you think about it in those categories. You've got sort of the firmographics type of company it is, the industry it's in, the demographics, who's this decision maker, and what is their education level? What is, just some of those
What's important to them.
What's important to them. And then some of those more emotional, behavioral, decision making, problem solving, components. So it sounds like it's an interesting sort of three pillars. So what happens if you start to do that overlap? Is there a target size you might be looking for when you're talking about looking for those commonalities? Do you know you have an ICP if it's a certain size, or there's a certain amount of overlap? Is there kind of a
like a rule of thumb?
Yeah.
Well, you certainly have to have enough, addressable market that it makes sense, right? And they also have to have budget. So it could be the perfect thing, but if it's, to 12-year-olds who have no money, and you can't get go through their parents, yes, exactly, then not so good. So I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule, but certainly I think, if you are trying to only sell to the top largest 500 companies in the world, that's going to be very challenging. And it's also very hard to, get that go-to-market motion really revved up, because you are going to have such long sales cycles, and, you have very, very limited targets. That doesn't mean that people have not done that. I mean, that's just a different sales motion, and it looks very different. You're doing a lot of whale hunting, and, smaller fish you're not necessarily setting the net up. So I would say that doesn't mean that that's not possible, but certainly you want to have enough, depending on what the product is that you're trying to sell and sort of your go-to-market motions beyond that. You have to have something, like if you're going to have an outbound email campaign, if you send 500 and that's all that ever you get to, you only have so many touch points before you saturate someone. So that's probably not going to be the best target market. But I don't think that I think for the most part, and I will say that I've never really got involved with companies that they have no clue whatsoever. It's usually that they have too many, that they're like, we could sell to this sector, we could sell to this sector, we could sell to this sector. It's not that they don't have enough, it's that they have too many. And so it's like you're going through an exercise of saying who is the best, and part of trying to determine the best option is the size of that option and how many potential prospects there are out there.
That is a really good clarification. So if I hear you correctly, you're going to end up with a pool of potential ICPs. If you stack rank them and say you have a couple of very disparate markets or, a product and a service that are very different, is it okay to have multiple ICPs, or are you better off having one and a set of target audiences or target markets kind of working alongside?
My personal opinion is focus is key and number one. So I would say if I had, and it's not that you're having to make that decision forever, right? But I would say choose the highest probable segment that has plenty of prospects, that has the ability to pay, that has, shown that the segment needs it, that you have a repeatable process, and go after exclusively that particular ICP for 2 to 3 quarters. Learn that whole entire process, and you can always expand your ICP once you can sort of get the engine going on that. But you want, like, you think about every single ICP you have requires a different marketing motion, a different message, different like competitive cards for whoever's coming in. Like there's just it exponentially grows the amount of internal distraction multiple ICPs causes. And so if you can get the entire organization, and then who wins out on over product if they have slightly different product needs and somebody's needing, one feature set over another, which one wins out? So I think that it causes like schizophrenia internally if you have too many things that you're trying to chase. So it has a very good clarifying and focus of impact on the organization if you can get everybody rallied around the one. And then again, it feels scary sometimes because it's like, oh my goodness, I could fish in the entire ocean, and now you're telling me we can only catch one type of fish. But like our entire like fishing system is set up for that. It's that we have the best rod for that. We have the best bait for that. So those are the ones that we're going to really focus on. And if we just focus on that, then clearly we can catch plenty of food for everybody. And then when we're ready and everybody's fully fed and we know how to go catch them, then we can say, hey, why don't we try this different type of bait and go after a different type of fish? So like just convincing, like, okay, it's not something that we have to walk away from this market forever. But most founders, especially early on, because that's how your mind has to work, right? Like we can sell it to these people, we can sell it to these people, we can sell it to these people. And you get in that habit when you're trying to find product market fit, then you have to like put your head up at some point and say, okay, it's super inefficient. Everybody is like hunting for everybody and everything. And so what if we just simply took the time, determined who it was that we service the best, that we have the best opportunity to not only win, but to retain and to grow, and then put all of our energy toward that.
I think that's really smart. So you mentioned sort of a 2 to 3 quarter testing period. Are there any specific performance indicators that will tell you that you're doing it right? Is it the number of fish you're catching? Is it the size of the fish you're catching? Is it a combination?
Yeah, I would say yes, but the most important thing is going to be the conversion rate, right? Because then if you are getting a huge number at the top and nothing's converting, then we know that we're off. If we're getting a small number, but it's 100% is converting, then we know that we've at least got something, and we might just need to open the aperture a little bit. But the conversion rate for me is the best early indication. And again, the sales team, if they're telling me yes, like, because they're the first ones to hit, right? Because we're not going to really know they have those initial conversations and they're doing those qualifying conversations where they're actually taking a lead that has come in. If they're like, these are the greatest conversations, and I can just hear it, it's like totally resonating with them. And, that new value prop stuff that we were talking about for this ICP is really working really well. So say keep very close contact with the people who are on the front lines. And, of course, the conversion rate says it all. And then the lagging indicators are your revenue, your retention, and your growth rate. So, but those could take depending on the sales cycle, those could take a while. So just the people who are actually having the conversations will be a good indication. And certainly the marketing metrics or the sales pipeline conversion rates will tell us.
Yeah. That's okay. That's great. So I think that really kind of transitions into sort of the next level of strategy, which is how, once you have that ICP established, it really begins to fuel the funnel, the marketing strategies, and really qualifying things for sales. I think the question then is, are there specific ways that, a startup, especially a lean startup that is trying to do all of this themselves, how should they make that connection from, okay, we've got the ICP, how does this inform our marketing strategies?
Yeah, so I always say like the foundational things are, who are we trying to reach? What do we tell them when we find them, and how do we find them?
You've got the ICP built, and that strategy is complex in and of itself, but you've pretty much confirmed that you know what you're doing in the direction you're going. And now you begin to take that next level of strategy, right? Into, qualifying marketing leads, qualifying sales leads. Are there any specific recommendations that you have for how the ICP should shape those marketing strategies?
No, I mean, essentially it drives the entire thing. So, now you have your ICP, so that's going to determine sort of what all of your content looks like, and, what is valuable to those, and what, those targets, and what are they trying to solve. So then all your value props start there and are around this ICP so that you're speaking their language. It's going to drive your list. And so that's always the fuel to any go-to-market motion, is kind of that prospect list, and if you're hunting in the right place. So that's going to dictate what that needs to look like, and how you go and sort of populate all those things within whatever technology tool stack you're using. It's, certainly going to inform what your sales process looks like, and how you take them through, and the value that you're talking to them about, who you're up against in terms of competition. So it really does sort of set the foundation of all things. But again, I think that you can't take on, marketing is this massive amount of activity. And so if you looked it up, and you could get overwhelmed really, really quickly. So to me, the ICP helps you, then you can at least have this set of activities to do against, one target, and then, stick with the basics. And I always say, if you know, who you're targeting, you know what to say when you find them, and you focus on finding them, then all else will take care of itself. And so, but I think to me, the ICP is the North Star. And if you don't have that, then at the very least, you're really inefficient in everything that you're trying to do.
Yeah, you're kind of shouting into the wind a little bit. So you've talked about kind of core elements being sort of value propositions and competitive differentiation. Is there anything more around those two elements that is worth noting? For example, how many value propositions is the right amount?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I advocate simplicity.
Yeah.
So, I say if you have 3 core value props, then, that will determine a lot of kind of what your marketing message is going to be. You're going to do A/B testing. You're going to find out what resonates. You have to take that to the next level to keep your sales, employees, prepared and ready to sort of field all kind of questions. And so that has to take that to a whole nother level. So it's not just what your value prop is, it's how that compares to somebody else who's saying the exact same thing. So now what are our key differentiators? What do we do better?
Yeah.
And so there's, again, the synergy between what we're saying in a marketing message. And I always say, we don't have to say everything. We just have to have them interested enough to have a conversation. So that's a lot different methodology, and that's a lot different, sort of level of what we're trying to accomplish than how we have to arm our sales team. But those two messages should be very, very similar.
Yeah.
And the marketing team should know fully what is competitively happening and what the sales team is up against. And the sales team needs to know 100% of how the marketing team is positioning and what got that person on the phone to begin with.
I think that's really smart. And one of the things that I think that helps to do is to avoid a Me Too presence in the marketplace, which I think a lot of companies fall subject to, because, you look at the bellwethers in your market and you're like, well, we can do that. We can do it as well. We might be able to do it better. But what I'm hearing you say is having that strategic focus and the ability for your frontline teams to say, oh, I hear this problem with this ICP that we're trying to solve. So this value proposition is going to speak to that. And we're going to be able to maybe speak to the differentiation, but also show the differentiation. I would imagine it streamlines that conversation.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing is, what is streamlined is the coordination if you have an ICP and everybody understands what it is,
Mhm.
I know you've probably been part of, and hopefully not, but a part of an organization where there's competitive tension between sales and marketing, like who got the lead
Right.
and all that. And
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And so, and you know, the other thing is it's very, very difficult. I mean, if you were a salesperson and you had an outbound call
Mhm.
and you made that to an ICP that the marketing team developed the list for, and that prospect then went to the website and checked it out, and you had customer testimonials or you had white papers and you had other things, what made that person buy? A combination of all those things. And so getting everybody in the entire organization grounded, because that's the other thing is that happens is then they're like, this isn't qualified. Well, why isn't it qualified? But all we're getting is junk coming from the marketing team, like these leads are terrible, blah, blah, blah. So like if you have an ICP, everybody knows what it's after. Everybody knows what good looks like. And so, and then it can keep like, this is what we're trying to do as an organization. Everybody has a metric of revenue. Everybody is like has some piece of understanding about what's happening with the conversion rates. And that's what it is. It's not vanity metrics about how many leads we got. It's how many of those make it to the bottom of the funnel, but it's the coordination between what's happening between sales and marketing. ICP grounds everyone on who it is we're going after and what those people value, and then how our product then services what those people are trying to solve. And so if everybody is grounded in the same thing, it's very easy to say it's qualified because it's ICP or it's not qualified because it's not.
Right.
And it also that sales understands that this is, you know, it's a little bit of art and science on the marketing, right? And you're trying to like sometimes just you hit it out of the park and it's working great, and other times it's just not. And we just have to continue to iterate and say, like, it kind of goes hardens back to what you were talking about before, where, you know, like, how is it that, you know, when we said, hey, we need to have coordination and we need to have people, you know, sharing what they think is working with the ICP or what they're experiencing, you know, on the front lines. And so there's a feedback loop that happens with marketing, but there's a feedback loop that happens with sales. And so like it's amazing to me how many times in the same company, sales has no idea what the marketing campaigns are or what's being communicated to the marketplace, or the person that picked up the phone or, you know, asked for a demo, what they're responding to. So just kind of norming in the fact that, you know, the ICP is sort of the North Star for everyone. And this is like, hey, this is what we're trying. This is what we need you guys to talk to, you know, tell us about if it's not working, if it is working, and that there's just this coordination that's happening. And of course, product and success are also a part of that coordination. But, you know, I think being able to have, you know, that ICP really helps everybody understand and coordinate internally as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's really smart. And, you know, I would imagine that, well, ostensibly, the smaller the company, the easier it is for everyone to have a shared objective, to have those shared KPIs, to look at that and say that is everyone's North Star. As a company scaled, I would imagine that some of that disconnection can be a little bit tricky. As we wrap up, I think I would be curious to know, you know, do you have recommendations for keeping everybody honed in on that singular ICP and reviewing them every couple of quarters together with the same mindset of like, okay, we're resetting our collective North Star. Is there a good way to do that?
Well, I mean, it starts with leadership, right? So it has to be important to the CEO, and the CEO has to have, you know, complete coordination with, and sometimes it's a chief revenue officer, and they might actually have both. But if it's a chief marketing officer, chief revenue, chief success, even your CTO, that is normed in that. And I think that where I've seen it the most successful is where you know, annually, because the larger you are, the less frequent, you know, it's not necessarily every couple quarters. When you're small, you better be doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, just basically having sort of a debrief on what we're learning and what we're having and what we're seeing, you know, that those are the best because those are the shortest cycles, right? But having that be part of the strategic planning process that we are revisiting, like, you know, yes, mission, vision, values, but also who's our target, who's our ICP, how do we talk to it, and then how does all of the things that we're doing as a company, whether that's marketing, sales, product, success, growth, channel partners, everything across all of it, you know, unified and, you know, trying to sort of support the same North Star, then I think if that just becomes normed in, that this is, this is a grounding factor for all of us, which is who our ICP is, then I think that that's where I've seen it most successful, is when it's just a part of the annual process.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And, what I hear is that everyone is equally important to this process. And, I would imagine that culturally, that's great for an organization as well. So you're getting this ability to focus, to streamline, to potentially just work smarter with the resources you have, but also allow everyone across the organization to have a hand in this one central thing that can drive the company forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else that works the same way.
Yeah.
And, if you think, it is absolutely everyone, and I always say it takes a village, but, the success team is just as important. They're having, they're upselling, they're cross-selling, they're retaining customers. And so everybody has a hand in it. There's, the product obviously is developing in ways that support what we need for new sales and growth sales. And so it is a collaboration at its finest.
I love that. That's a great place to end. And thank you so much. This has been
Thank you.
Super, super informative.
Thanks for listening to the BIP Ventures Extraordinary Pursuits podcast. Check the show notes on our blog for the resources we discussed. You can find Extraordinary Pursuits on your favorite audio platform. Be sure to subscribe to the BIP Ventures YouTube channel and connect with us on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram so you get all the stories, learnings, and ideas for ways to thrive in the innovation economy. And if you liked this episode, be generous. Share it.